Rain pelted the sprawling glass facade of Summit Hills Mall, creating a shimmering curtain that obscured the morning light. Inside, the climate-controlled environment hummed with the quiet anticipation of another business day. Most stores wouldn't open for another hour, but a handful of early employees were already trickling in, ID badges swinging from lanyards as they hurried past the silent fountains and darkened storefronts. Among them walked a solitary figure, unnoticed and unremarkable. He wore faded jeans with a small tear at the knee, scuffed black boots that had clearly traveled many miles, and a well-worn navy hoodie pulled low over his face. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and his shoulder-length dark hair hung in slightly damp strands from the rain outside. Nothing about him suggested wealth or importance, just another early riser, perhaps headed to a maintenance job or morning shift. What no one realized was that Keanu Reeves was making one of his periodic, unannounced inspections of the property he had quietly purchased 3 years ago. The Summit Hills Mall had been struggling when he bought it, not as a splashy investment, but because he'd grown up nearby and remembered how important the community space had been to him as a teenager. The renovation had been completed without publicity, with most of the staff unaware of who actually owned the sprawling complex. Keanu preferred it that way. He could observe genuinely, see how things really operated when no one was putting on a show for the boss. He paused near the central atrium, hands tucked into his hoodie pockets, and tilted his head back to study the skylight. The recent repairs seemed to be holding, no leak stains on the marble floor despite the downpour outside. He made a mental note to compliment the contractors on their work. Another satisfied customer, he murmured to himself with a small smile, continuing his solitary inspection route. The overzealous guardian, Derek Sloan, had been head of security at Summit Hills Mall for exactly 17 days, and he was determined to make an impression. At 32, after a series of disappointments including a failed police academy application and 3 security jobs that had ended with what his former employers called excessive zeal, Derek had finally landed what he considered a prestigious position. Summit Hills wasn't just any mall. It was the recently renovated crown jewel of the county's retail landscape, catering to an upscale clientele that Derek desperately wanted to be part of himself someday. His uniform was immaculate, pressed to knife-edge perfection, shoes polished to a mirror shine, utility belt arranged with mathematical precision. The mall management company had a strict, friendly security policy, but Derek had his own vision of how security should operate, with authority, intimidation, and unquestioned control. "Time to make my rounds," he announced to no one in particular, straightening his shoulders and squaring his jaw as he set out from the security office. His first 2 weeks had been, in his opinion, a stunning success. He'd ejected 3 teenagers for loitering, confronted a woman whose service dog he'd mistaken for a pet, and lectured countless employees about minor infractions of mall policies that even he had only skimmed. What Derek didn't know, what no one had thought to tell him during his hasty training, was that the mall's mysterious owner occasionally dropped by without announcement. And on this particular rainy morning, Derek was about to make the biggest mistake of his professional life: the encounter. Keanu had made his way to the north wing, where a new children's play area was under construction. He stood at the temporary barrier, hands still in his pockets, nodding slightly as he examined the half-installed equipment. The colorful climbing structures were designed to be inclusive for children with different abilities, something he had specifically requested in the renovation plans. "Hey, you! This area is closed to the public!" The sharp voice cut through the ambient hum of the mall's morning preparations. Keanu turned slowly, his expression calm and curious rather than alarmed. Walking toward him with exaggerated authority was a security guard, hand already resting on his radio as if preparing to call for backup. "Good morning," Keanu responded quietly, offering a slight nod. Derek Sloan faltered for just a moment. There was something familiar about the man's face, but he couldn't quite place it, and more importantly, the stranger was clearly violating mall protocol. Construction areas were strictly off-limits, and this guy was peering over the barrier like he owned the place. "Sir, I need to see your employee ID or contractor badge." Derek's voice carried the artificial deepness he used when trying to sound authoritative. Keanu patted his pockets lightly and gave an apologetic shrug. I don't have it with me today. Derek's posture stiffened. This was exactly the kind of situation that could showcase his dedication to security protocols. Then I'm going to have to ask what you're doing here before opening hours. This mall doesn't open to the public until 10. Just checking on the progress? Keanu replied, gesturing toward the play area. It's looking good. Are you with the construction company? Derek demanded, stepping closer, his hand now touching the walkie-talkie at his belt. Keanu's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. No, I'm not with the construction company. Then you have no business being here, Derek declared triumphantly. I'm going to have to escort you out of the mall immediately. Keanu opened his mouth as if to explain, then seemed to reconsider. His shoulders rose and fell in a small shrug. If you think that's best. Derek was momentarily thrown by the lack of resistance, but quickly recovered his stern demeanor. I do. This way, please. He gestured toward the nearest exit with a sweeping motion that he hoped conveyed both authority and professionalism. As they walked, Derek couldn't help but launch into what his previous supervisor had called his security sermon. Summit Hills has a zero-tolerance policy for unauthorized personnel. We maintain these standards for everyone's safety and security. The construction zone is particularly dangerous. The construction company has an excellent safety record, Keanu interjected mildly. But I understand your concern. Derek frowned, not appreciating the interruption to his practiced speech. Nevertheless, rules are rules. Without proper ID, no one is permitted on these premises before opening hours. They passed Marina Chen, the mall's marketing director, who was hurrying toward her office with a cardboard tray of coffee cups. She glanced up, did a double take at seeing Keanu being escorted by security, and nearly dropped her drinks. Mr. Reeves, she exclaimed. I didn't know you were visiting today. Derek's stride faltered. Mr. Reeves? Marina hurried over, her expression a mixture of delight and confusion. Is everything all right? Can I get you anything? I would have prepared something if I'd known you were coming. Keanu smiled gently at her. Everything's fine, Marina. How's your mom doing after her surgery? Much better. Thank you for asking. And for the flowers you sent. They really brightened her hospital room. Derek stood frozen, his brain frantically processing what was happening. The mysterious hooded man he was in the process of ejecting knew the marketing director by name. The marketing director had called him Mr. Reeves, and there was something increasingly familiar about that face. I'm sorry, Derek interrupted, but who exactly are you? Marina looked at Derek with an expression that suggested she wasn't sure if he was joking. Derek, this is Keanu Reeves. He owns Summit Hills Mall. The world seemed to tilt beneath Derek's polished shoes. His mouth opened, but no words emerged. Keanu extended his hand. I don't think we've met. You must be new. The revelation. Derek stared at the outstretched hand as if it might transform into something dangerous. His mind was racing through a series of increasingly horrified realizations. He had just attempted to throw the owner of the mall out of his own property. Not just any owner, but Keanu Reeves, the actor whose face had been on posters in Derek's college dorm room, whose movies Derek had watched dozens of times. And now that the hood was pushed back slightly, the resemblance was unmistakable. But, Derek stammered, his carefully cultivated authoritative voice now reduced to a strangled whisper. Derek Sloan, our new head of security, Marina filled in smoothly, giving Derek a look that clearly communicated, pull yourself together. He's been with us for about 2 weeks now. 17 days, Derek managed to correct automatically, then winced at his own pedantry. Keanu's hand remained extended, his expression betraying no annoyance or mockery. It's good to meet you, Derek. Security is important to me, too. Mechanically, Derek shook the offered hand, feeling as though he were moving through a dream. I'm so sorry, sir. I had no idea. They never told me. I mean, I should have recognized, but with the hoodie and... No need for apologies, Keanu interrupted gently. You were doing your job, checking on people who don't appear to belong. That's exactly what you should be doing. Derek blinked rapidly, trying to process this unexpected grace. But I was taking you to throw you out of your own mall. Keanu's laugh was soft and genuine. Wouldn't be the first time something like that has happened. Besides, I prefer to visit without announcement. Helps me see how things really work. Marina, sensing Derek's continuing distress, interjected, Mr. Reeves is very hands-on with the renovation projects. He actually designed several of the community spaces himself, including the new play area you were checking on. The inclusive playground, Derek said faintly, pieces falling into place, the one with equipment for children with disabilities. Keanu nodded, a hint of enthusiasm warming his expression. It's important that every child has a place to play. I had some specific ideas about the layout. Derek was experiencing the strange sensation of his preconceptions rearranging themselves in real time. Here was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, worth millions, secretly owning a suburban mall and personally designing playground equipment for children with disabilities. And instead of being angry at nearly being ejected, he seemed genuinely pleased that security was being vigilant. Would you like to continue your inspection, Mr. Reeves? Marina asked. I can have breakfast brought to the conference room afterward. That sounds great, and Derek should join us, Keanu suggested, turning to the still stunned security guard. I'd like to hear his observations about our security protocols. Fresh eyes are valuable. The conversation. 30 minutes later, Derek found himself sitting in the executive conference room, picking nervously at a croissant, while Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves, reviewed his notes on mall security. These are good observations, Keanu said, flipping through the small notebook Derek had reluctantly handed over. I especially like your point about the south entrance camera angles. We should adjust those. Thank you, sir, Derek managed, still feeling as though he might wake up at any moment. Please call me Keanu. Derek nodded, though he wasn't sure he could actually bring himself to use the actor's first name. I just want to apologize again for this morning. I never imagined that the owner would show up looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. Keanu's eyes crinkled with amusement. That's exactly why I do it this way. I get to see how people really operate, not how they perform when they know the boss is watching. But still, I should have been more respectful to someone who didn't look important. Keanu finished, his tone gentler now, more thoughtful. That's actually something worth thinking about. Derek felt a flush of shame creep up his neck. Put that way, his actions reflected something about his character that he wasn't entirely comfortable confronting. I admit I might have been overzealous, he said carefully. Enthusiasm for your job isn't a bad thing, Keanu replied, but maybe consider that everyone deserves the same level of respect, badge or no badge. The words hung in the air between them, not accusatory but thought-provoking. Derek found himself mentally reviewing his first 17 days at Summit Hills, the teenagers he'd confronted with perhaps unnecessary severity, the service dog owner he'd embarrassed, the maintenance worker he'd lectured about using the public restroom instead of the employee facilities. I think I understand, Derek said slowly. I've been trying so hard to prove myself that I forgot the human element. Keanu nodded. Security is important. Boundaries matter. But so does dignity. He closed the notebook and slid it back across the table. The best security makes people feel safe, not intimidated. Derek accepted the notebook, feeling a strange mix of humiliation and illumination. I appreciate you taking the time to explain this instead of, well, firing me on the spot. Keanu's laugh was unexpected and genuine. That would be a bit dramatic, don't you think? Besides, everyone deserves a chance to grow. He leaned forward slightly. You know what I think would be a great project for you? Helping design the security protocols for the new community center wing. We want it to be safe but welcoming, especially for the after-school programs. You want my input? Derek couldn't hide his surprise. You have a good eye for security vulnerabilities. Keanu said, tapping the notebook. Now we just need to balance that with creating a space where people feel welcome. The transformation. Over the next few weeks, Derek underwent a profound shift in his approach to his role. Working on the community center security plans with Keanu, who visited more frequently now, though still without fanfare, taught him that effective security wasn't about throwing weight around or enforcing rules for the sake of rules. It was about creating an environment where people felt both safe and respected. The mall staff, who had initially given Derek a wide berth, began to notice the change. His uniform was still impeccably maintained, but his posture had softened. He learned the names of the maintenance staff and greeted the early morning retail workers with genuine interest in their days. He developed a particular rapport with the teenagers who gathered at the mall after school, implementing a respectful monitoring approach rather than the zero-tolerance policy he had initially favored. 1 month after the infamous ejection incident, as it had come to be known among the mall staff, Derek was completing his morning rounds when he noticed a familiar hooded figure entering through the service corridor. This time, though, he recognized Keanu immediately. "Good morning," Derek called, approaching with a smile rather than suspicion. "Here to check on the community center progress?" Keanu pushed his hood back, returning the smile. "Actually, I came to see how you're doing. Marina tells me there's been quite a transformation in our security approach." Derek nodded, feeling a strange sense of pride that had nothing to do with his pressed uniform or polished shoes. "I've been implementing some of the ideas we discussed, focusing on creating a secure environment without sacrificing the human connection." "And how's that working out?" "Incident reports are down 30%, Derek replied. "And I've started a mentorship program with some of the kids who hang out here after school. Turns out they don't want trouble, they just want somewhere to belong." Keanu's expression was one of genuine approval. "That's excellent work, Derek. Really excellent." They walked together toward the nearly completed community center, discussing the upcoming grand opening. As they turned a corner, they encountered a young custodian who had accidentally knocked over a trash can, spilling its contents across the polished floor. The old Derek would have immediately launched into a lecture about carelessness and mall cleanliness standards. Instead, he simply knelt down and began helping the flustered young man collect the scattered trash. "Don't worry about it," Derek said kindly. "Accidents happen." He was so focused on the task that he didn't immediately notice Keanu joining them on the floor, gathering up discarded food wrappers and empty coffee cups. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Reeves," the custodian stammered, clearly recognizing the actor despite his casual attire. "We're all just trying to keep this place nice," Keanu replied simply, continuing to help until every piece of trash was collected. As they stood, the young custodian thanked them profusely before continuing on his rounds. "You know," Derek said thoughtfully, watching the custodian depart, "a few weeks ago, I would have seen that as an opportunity to assert authority. Now I see it as what it really was, a chance to help someone having a rough moment." Keanu clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "And that, Derek, is why I know leaving the community center security in your hands is the right decision." "Wait, what?" Derek turned, surprise evident on his face. "I'm putting you in charge of the community center security team," Keanu explained. "It's going to be a separate program from the main mall security, focused specifically on creating a safe space for the kids and families who will be using the facilities. Given your new approach and the mentorship program you started, you're the obvious choice to lead it." For perhaps the first time in his professional life, Derek was speechless, not because of embarrassment or confusion, but because of genuine emotion. The transformation that had begun with his most humiliating professional moment had led to something he hadn't even known to aspire to, a role where both his attention to security details and his newly discovered empathy could make a real difference. The reflection. 6 months later, Summit Hills Mall had become known throughout the region not just for its upscale shopping, but for its innovative community programs. The inclusive playground was always filled with children of all abilities, and the community center hosted everything from tutoring sessions to senior exercise classes to job training workshops. Derek's security team, now expanded to include several of the teenagers from his mentorship program who worked part-time after school, had received recognition from the county for their community-centered approach to safety. Rather than focusing solely on preventing negative behaviors, they actively fostered positive engagement, getting to know community members, understanding their needs, and creating an environment where everyone felt both safe and valued. On the 1-year anniversary of the mall's renovation completion, a small private celebration was held in the community center. Keanu, as usual, arrived without fanfare, dressed in his characteristic simple style. "I have something for you," he told Derek, handing him a small box. Inside was a security badge, unlike the standard issue ones worn by the mall staff. This one was specially designed, with the words Community Security Director engraved beneath Derek's name. "This is to make it official," Keanu explained. "The community center program has been so successful that we're implementing it in 3 other malls I've invested in. You'll be overseeing all of them, training new teams in your approach." Derek ran his finger over the engraved title, remembering the man he had been on that rainy morning a year ago, so concerned with projecting authority that he had actually tried to throw Keanu Reeves out of his own mall. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't need to say anything," Keanu replied. "Your work speaks for itself." Later, as the small gathering enjoyed cake and conversation, Derek found himself standing next to Keanu, observing the diverse group of people who had come together to create something special at Summit Hills. "You know," Derek said quietly, "I've been meaning to ask you something for a year now. Why didn't you just tell me who you were that first day? It would have saved us both a lot of trouble." Keanu considered the question, his gaze thoughtful. "Would it have, though? If I had pulled rank, used my name or position, what would you have learned?" Derek nodded slowly, understanding. "I would have just been performing respect instead of learning to actually feel it." "Exactly. And I would have just been another privileged person using my status to get special treatment." Keanu smiled slightly. "Instead, we both got something more valuable. A lesson in humility," Derek suggested, "and in seeing people for who they are, not what they appear to be." Keanu gestured toward the gathered community. "Every person has value, Derek. Every person deserves dignity. Sometimes we need to be reminded of that. I know I do." As Derek looked out at the faces of the people whose lives had been touched by the transformed mall, the seniors who now had a safe place to walk in the mornings, the kids who came for tutoring and stayed for mentorship, the parents who could relax knowing their children with disabilities could play alongside their peers, he realized how profound that simple truth really was. What had begun as his most embarrassing professional mistake had become the catalyst for his most meaningful professional growth. And it had all started because he hadn't recognized Keanu Reeves. Or rather, because he hadn't treated an unassuming man in a hoodie with the same respect he would have shown to a recognizable celebrity. "Thank you," Derek said simply, "for not firing me when you had every right to." "Thank you," Keanu countered, "for showing that people can grow when given the chance." He raised his water glass in a small toast, to seeing people as they truly are. Derek raised his own glass, completing the toast, and to second chances. Around them, the community center hummed with life and purpose, a testament to what was possible when security came from understanding rather than intimidation, when rules existed to protect dignity rather than merely to assert control, and when people were valued simply for being people, regardless of their appearance or status. And in the heart of it all stood an unlikely pair. A Hollywood star who owned the mall but dressed like an everyday visitor, and a security guard who had once tried to throw him out but now helped bring his vision to life. Together, they had created something that transcended their individual roles, a space where everyone, regardless of who they were or how they looked, could feel both safe and seen. In the end, that was the most valuable security of all.